Good afternoon, everyone, or maybe morning, depending on where you are in the world. This is a presentation on risk management, specifically kind of focused on the aerospace scheme, but it will sort of cover ISO 9001 as well. Just so I know everyone can hear me, there's a question box. Could someone just quickly write a question, just so I know everyone can hear me okay? Thank you. Yep, a few of you. Okay, just a little bit of housekeeping. This will be recorded and it will be made available to you next week, be emailed to you, so you'll have the slides. The video will also be uploaded to YouTube probably next week, so you can also review this if you wish. I'm going to try and make this a little bit different than previous webinars and make it interactive. So in the question box that you do have, feel free to ask questions as we go along. I may not be able to answer all of them, but I'll do my best. Okay, any that I can't answer at that time, I can follow up later with an email, or feel free to contact me yourselves. Okay, we'll get started. Okay, so this is the agenda I've set out. Okay, first of all, just quickly touch base on the risk-based thinking, what the definition is and why it's in the standard. Some of you may have attended Martin's webinar last week. He did cover some of this, so I'm only going to briefly touch on those. I'm going to go a bit more in depth in some of the other items. Okay, then we'll go over the benefits, just some of the benefits that you can get from a webinar, from a risk-based thinking approach to your management system. We'll go over risk management program, setting out a plan. We'll walk through the steps, the 4 key steps. So identifying the risks, performing a risk assessment, taking necessary actions, and risk and reporting and monitoring after that. Okay, which is the 4 key steps. We'll also then look at how you can maintain the system. And there's a little bit as well about risk maturity model, which kind of takes it to the next level. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so risk-based thinking is not a new concept. It was in the previous versions of the standard, like sort of ISO 9001. Okay, but it was generally called preventive action. Okay, but it's always been in there. So what they've done in the new standard is remove the words preventive action, because it was often confusing for people. They weren't too sure what it was about. Okay, but in essence, it was there to eliminate potential non-conformances. Okay, what they've done is they've removed that, and they've just said the whole standard is now to incorporate a risk-based thinking approach. Okay, so anything you do with your management system, this can be 9000 and AS9100, or indeed some of the other standards such as 14001, the health and safety standard 45001, and it gets you to think about your management system from a risk perspective. Implement what you need to mitigate the risks. Okay. Also covers opportunities. Some people think the opportunities are just kind of ideas and things like that before you think, like how you're going to go into a market, things like that. Generally, the opportunities are there to be a result of an identified risk. What are the opportunities we can exploit from a risk identified? Okay, so it'll be a favorable situation that we intend to achieve. Okay, by using risk-based thinking, you can really establish a basis for increasing the effectiveness of the management system. It's still new concept, so people are still working on it, but if you implement it correctly, you can really start to get some more benefit from your system. Okay, and we'll go into a little bit more detail on that as we go along. Okay, so the definition of risk. Risk is defined as an undesirable situation or circumstance that has both a likelihood of occurring and a potentially negative consequence. So some people, when we see their management systems, they may look at the likelihood of occurring, but not necessarily the consequence of that. You should be looking at both of those things when you're approaching this, because something may have a real big consequence, may be disastrous, but the actual chance of that happening are quite rare. So you may not need to focus your efforts on that. So it's important to use both of those concepts. Okay, so risk is the effect of uncertainty, and any such uncertainty can have positive or negative effects. And a positive deviation arising from a risk can provide an opportunity, but not all positive effects of risk result in opportunities. Okay, so the main focus here is identifying your risks. Look at what you can do with your management system to mitigate those risks. And it's really there to carve the way for how your management system is going to be set up. Okay, some people leave this to the last point when they are setting up their management system. It really should be at the forefront. Okay, you build your system around those risks and those opportunities. Okay, so some of the benefits, there's process benefits, product, service, and mission benefits. One of the main benefits is it provides a better customer focus and business focus. Okay, you can have reduced costs, reduce lead times, improve quality, increase customer satisfaction, greater reliability of products and services, which is very critical to the aerospace industry. Obviously, we don't want planes falling out the sky. Obviously, Boeing's had some issues recently. So the greater reliability of products is a key factor in the aerospace sector, but it can apply to anything really. Okay, especially construction, automotive, things like that. Okay, so some of the process benefits, you can get an increase the likelihood of achieving your objectives. It can encourage proactive management, be aware of the need to identify and treat risk throughout the organization, so it raises awareness, improves the identification of threats, okay, makes people more aware of what there is around them, comply with relevant legal and regulatory requirements, okay, so makes people think more, what are the legal requirements to the process that we're facing, what's changed, anything new coming in, helps you keep on top of those things. Okay, can improve financial reporting and governance, stakeholder confidence and trust. So if people know you've got a good risk management process, it can give customers, it can give employees, give suppliers greater confidence in the business that you control. Okay, establish a reliable basis for decision making and planning. So you approach things in a risk-based approach. You think about things, what are the risks, and then you take certain actions around the business. You can effectively allocate and use resource for risk treatment. Improve operational effectiveness and efficiency. You can cut out a lot of waste in your process by thinking things risk. Where are the risks? What can we reduce? Where are we wasting things on effort trying to fix things? So it can really cut down your lead times in a lot of cases. And the cost of risk management is actually typically less than the cost of the issue itself. Okay, so implementing a good risk management approach to things can actually save you money by not trying to fix things later down the line should they occur. Okay. You can also minimize losses and improve loss prevention, look at around the health and safety performance, environmental protection, and it improves organizational learning and resilience. Okay, so one of my clients, one point when they first set up their system, they were a stockist of material. What they actually realized that one of their key factors was getting the customer. Now they had a problem with supply base because a lot of them were through Europe, and they got impacted a lot by
the bad weather and things like that, and certain legislation from other countries on how many people they need to have in the trucks as they're driving. So what they've done, they saw that as a big risk. They looked at the opportunity, and what they actually done was all they'd done was started ordering products a little bit sooner, gave them a bit more of a lead time. Okay, so the products were coming in the door ahead of time or just on time, and it managed to get them to turn around and satisfy their client requirements a lot quicker. And that actually boosted their business because clients were then trusting them, coming back to them for more material over time. So it's really beneficial to them. Some of the product and service benefits, you could reduce the likelihood of delivering non-conforming product. Okay, very important to the aerospace sector, but it can be of great benefit to any organization really. Okay, proper risk management approach can really cut down the chances of non-conformances. Okay, can also improve the lead times, reduce the likelihood of delivering late product. It really will then enhance customer satisfaction. Okay. Okay. So, as I said, there are 4 key steps to a risk management plan. I've put a little diagram here. Okay, we'll start off step 1, risk identification, move around step 2, risk assessment, step 3, risk action management, step 4, risk reporting and monitoring. Okay, it does keep going around in a circle. Okay, so just because you get to step 4 doesn't mean you then have to go back to step 1. The business changes and things like that. So we'll cover that a little bit later on. Okay, but it's actually quite a simple process when you break it down into these 4 key steps. Okay, so we'll go through each one in a little bit more detail. Okay, by approaching it in a systematic way, it helps you ensure you're covering all risks, identifying all risks. Often when we're auditing, we find people have missed certain things because they haven't really done the risk identification correctly. They kind of jump off and try and do everything at once. But if you break it down into the 4 key steps do step 1 before you move on to step 2, it ensures you've captured pretty much everything that you should occur. Okay, we've got a little question here. I'll just go, what sort of evidence would you expect to see that validates an organisation has embraced risk-based thinking? What would you look for documented evidence? Okay, so this question from Peter, what sort of evidence would we expect to see? Okay, so there's actually 2 different approaches here. If it's an ISO 9001 system, you don't necessarily need to document things. Okay, if it's an aerospace system, AS100, AS90, and there are certain bits that you do need to document, which we'll cover. Okay, I'll actually give you some tools that you can use to demonstrate this. But if it's an ISO 9001 system, it's really up to the auditor's skill to extract that information out of the sort of top management. You can probe in questions, ask them about the business. We'll go in a little bit more detail on this in a couple of slides actually. So the evidence kind of depends on the organisation's management system that we're looking at. Maybe if you want to ask another question, Peter, tell me if you're thinking from a 9001 or an aerospace. I can give you a bit more insight into that. Okay, so when you're approaching the risk identification, you should always think PDCA. Everyone here should probably know what PDCA is, Plan, Do, Check, Act methodology. So I've done a little diagram here that sets out the overall processes of an organisation. Just obviously a very dummy organisation here. But if you take it from the start, contract stage, through to the actual delivery of the product or service, if you identify risks at the contract stage, you have a high influence on how to control those risks as they go through the process, how you can mitigate them. And the actual cost is low in that process because you haven't spent money setting up systems. Okay, so by thinking about it at the front, you save money down the track. Okay, on the
reverse of that, if you get to the end of your operation and you have the risks, there might not be too much you can do because you've put all the effort into all the previous steps. Okay, so the cost of actually fixing something that's gone wrong could be really high. For example, it could be something back in the design. So we've designed something, purchased all the materials, we've worked out the process, got to the end, realized it doesn't work or something's gone wrong. Then we have to go all the way back to the design phase. So we've implemented all those costs, all those processes, times, and really, if we actually thought about the risks correctly at the design stage, we could have mitigated all those risks and saved our money in the long run. So think just PDCA, how it flows through and feeding that information back, which we'll come to later about lessons learned and things like that. Okay, so Peter, okay, your construction facilities management. Okay, so you're probably doing ISO 9001, I'm assuming, not the aerospace standard. So you don't need to document anything. The bit you do need to document are your actions, the results of actions. That should be in your management review meeting at least. Okay, so you need to be able to say what you've done in terms of mitigating risks and what the results were of that. Were they effective or not? We'd expect to see something like that in your management review meeting. Not everyone does document their risks. I'll show you some tools that you can use as we're going through this, but you don't have to document it if you don't. It's up to the auditor's skill to be able to extract that information from the top management. What are the risks? What are you doing about it? Okay, so if you haven't documented it, that's fine. Okay, just hopefully your management team know what the risks are. Okay, hopefully that answers your question. If not, you can drop me an email later. So, okay, so risk identification. Okay, never do this on your own. We've seen time and time again that we'll look at someone's risk assessment process, we'll go through it, and you can tell straight away that someone's done it on their own. Everyone views risk differently. Someone in purchasing, for example, will have a different view on risks because it impacts them differently to someone in sales, for example. Okay, so when you do your risk identification, do it as a team. Get as many people as possible in different sort of positions within the business. It doesn't have to just be management. It's good to involve the people on the shop floor, maybe people on the ground. They're ones that are very much hands-on and probably know about the process quite well, really, in honesty, sometimes better than the management team because they're doing it day in, day out. So just get as many people involved as you can. Okay. Risk is throughout the entire standard, but I've highlighted here a couple of clauses. Now, these aren't all applicable if you're not in the aerospace. So clause 6.1 and 6.3, those are in the all standards. 8.1 with regards to risk is just aerospace. 8.2 with regards to risk is just aerospace, and so is 8.4. Although you do need to cover those as part of a 9001 management system, those three clauses there, 8.1, 8.2, 8.4, there are specific requirements inside those clauses there for the aerospace scheme. Okay, so 6.1 talks about your planning. 6.3 is about controlling the changes surrounding and the risks, which we'll cover on a bit later. So 8.1 is your operational risks from an aerospace perspective. 8.2 are the contract risks from an aerospace perspective, and 8.4 is around supply chain risks. That's a huge part, 8.4, and I'm going to be doing another webinar later in the year on that because it warrants something on its own. It can be very detailed. Okay, some of the examples of the types of risk that you can come across are financial risks, strategic, things that can impact your strategy, where you're going, compliance and effectiveness of your management system. Maybe there's a risk around you not meeting compliance obligations. Big one kind of in environmental and health and safety is what's the risk of us not being able to meet our compliance obligations. Okay, but it does also impact other sectors. Aerospace, there's tightly regulated. Are we going to miss meeting these regulations? Okay, operational, general operational planning, physical, environmental risks, human factors. Human factors is an interesting one, and it's the risk of personnel doing something wrong. Okay, are the instructions clear? What if there are no instructions? Is that a risk to the business? Some people say, do we need to document our procedures? Well, that's entirely up to you based on the risk, okay? An auditor won't come in and say, you must document your process here for how you're entering information onto your ERP system, okay? If you've got 50 people in there, maybe you do want to document something, okay? So the human factors element is quite interesting. There's political risks, okay? There's a lot of political things going on in the moment in the UK, as everybody knows. What are the risks posed to your business on that? Some people getting impacted by the economic, the dollar exchange rate and the pounds and things like that. And also the import-export controls at the moment with the dreaded word, the B word, which I won't say. Okay, so obviously environmental, health and safety risks, ethical, legal risks, the image of the business is also a risk that could be impacted. Okay, I'm going to touch on a little bit of that later on. Okay, when you do the risk identification, don't overcomplicate how you're going to document it. Okay, simple tools such as a whiteboard, pieces of paper, just scribble down your ideas. Don't try and put something formal in place just yet, and do not score it. Okay, just get your ideas down. Just jot them down on paper, whiteboard, whatever tool you want. Just round robin in your room with as many people as you can. Just get them all down on paper. Okay, doesn't matter if they're high, medium, and low risk. Doesn't matter. Okay, always when you're thinking about the risks, think of what the business is trying to achieve. Think of it from a strategic level. This is our strategy. Okay, when we go and look at the context of the business, this is what we're trying to do. What are the risks that are going to prevent us from achieving what we're trying to do? Okay, our primary focus, what's going to get in our way? Okay, we'll touch on that a little bit more in a minute. Okay, important bit as well, when the business changes, the risks could change, and then you've got to revisit your risk identification. We'll touch on that again a bit later as well. Okay, so I see risk as a kind of funnel. Okay, so you put all of your risks or your ideas, the factors I should say, that influence the business. These are typically things from your context of the organization and interested parties. Okay, put them into a funnel, and out the bottom pops the risks and opportunities. So I just think of it in that way, just to help people brainstorm. Okay, so one of the things that could come out of the context of the organization is that you have a limited customer base. Maybe 70–80% of your business is with one key customer. Okay, what are the risks around that? Okay, maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. What are you going to do about it? Okay, if anything, you may deem that risk as acceptable. One of the interested parties' needs could be on-time delivery, which is very common. People want things on time, okay? So what are the risks around us not meeting that? And then the factor could be changing legislation, okay? Is there legislation coming up? How is that going to impact our business? Is it going to help our business? It could hinder it. Do we need to change anything to suit that? Okay, so just keep jotting down all of your ideas. This is typically things from clause 4.1 and 4.2, which is the context and interested parties. Okay, so risk identification by the process. Okay, so I've just picked one here, purchasing, just an example, because every organization has purchasing. Think of what we're trying to achieve with this, with purchasing. Well, we need to get products in or services, and they need to be of the right quality, and obviously we want them on time. Okay, so we think about that's what we want from this process. Then we start thinking about the risks. What are the risks around that that's going to impact that on-time delivery and that quality? So we've got poor requirements flow down. Maybe we haven't communicated correctly what we desire from our supplier. poor understanding of the costs and the schedule risks. Okay, maybe we haven't got the quotes correct. Maybe we haven't understood the impact of this on our overall program that we're trying to deliver. Maybe we haven't assessed our suppliers correctly. There's a risk there. What if we don't assess them right? What could happen to our product and service? Okay, weak subcontract management. So not everyone's going to use subcontractors, obviously, depends on your business. But what's going to happen if we don't manage those correctly? How is it going to impact our business? Could be from an image perspective, could be financial. There's lots of things that could be impacted by some of these risks. Unclear deliverables. We haven't communicated to our suppliers what we actually want them to achieve. Okay, what we're expecting from them. You can obviously you do this for every process. I just use purchasing as an idea. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we're being forced to use certain suppliers by a customer, which is very common in the aerospace sector. You get customer delegated sources. Okay, we're forced to use certain suppliers, and often that does pose a lot of risks. Sometimes those suppliers get complacent and they don't deliver on time. They just know you've got to use them, so the price goes up. They don't really care too much about you because they know you have to use them. Okay, so just because there's customer delegated supplier does not mean you shouldn't consider the risks surrounding that. Okay, so once you've identified all the risks, you can then go ahead and assessing those risks. Are they high, medium, or low, for example? Okay, need to come up with the methodology. We'll go through a couple of examples of that in a minute. You do what works for your business. Okay, just needs to be consistent methodology and clear to the auditor. Come up with a scoring mechanism and mitigation points. So what I mean by mitigation points, what's acceptable? Okay, if we just take the basic concept of low, medium, or high, maybe we accept low and medium, but we won't accept any high risks. So we'll put in mitigations for anything high. There's a misconception that you have to put actions in for every identified risk. So often when I'm looking at someone's risk assessment, they will put a comment for an action against everything they've identified. That's not what the system's asking for. Okay, what you have to do is just identify what's good, what's a good point, what's a bad point, and then put in mitigations after those points. Okay, always, as I said earlier, think about the likelihood and consequence. Consequence is sometimes classed as severity. Okay, never look at it as a single thing. If something could have a really high severity and consequence, but the actual chances of it happening are very, very low. Okay, so the resulting score could be a medium or a low, for example. Okay, think about what the process is trying to achieve as you're scoring it. Okay, and do not leave it to one person, as I said. Okay, so just an example here of a risk assessment process, just a simple table. The top one would be likelihood, the bottom one would be consequence, and there's a score given against each one. Okay, 1 being a low, okay, 5 being a high. And you can put those scores together to come up with your overall score. The important bit is to define what those actually mean. What does moderate mean? What does low mean? Is it going to close our business, or it's going to have no impact on the business or the service that we provide? Some people just put in a scoring mechanism and don't actually define what each one of those means. So that's an important step. Make sure you define it clearly. Okay. Okay, another little example is a risk assessment matrix, which is quite common. A lot of people use these for health and safety, but there's nothing stopping you using these for management systems. Okay, you can still use the same scoring mechanism as before to define what all of those mean. Likelihood, almost certain, is pretty much definitely going to happen, and it says what it is. But severe on the top, what's that actually mean? What's that consequence? Does that mean death, closure, or what is it? So you need to put something around that that can help us understand what you mean and keeps it consistent so that everyone that's involved in the scoring is clear on what each of those classifications mean. Okay, so once you've identified your risks, you've got your mitigation points, you can then put in some action plans against those. As I say, you only put in mitigation plans for those points which you deem unacceptable. Okay, so let's just pick the high risk ones, for example, for now. We'll work on those and look at reducing the risk. We'll reduce the likelihood. That's what we kind of focus on. Don't need actions for all risks, just the ones relating to your trigger point. And you don't have to, you may wish to identify a resulting risk rating. If we implement these, what's it going to make our risk assessment look like? What's the score going to be in the end? Okay, so step 4, risk reporting and monitoring. This bit is often missed by organisations. A lot of people will put in, identify the risks, put in a scoring, put in some action plans, and then they basically leave it. Okay, you're missing the last step of the risk management process. How's it actually working? Are our mitigation plans correct? Okay, this is where you start to look at the results of your risk assessment process and was it actually effective, and we can feed those things back into the system. Okay, so one of the things, risk management effectiveness, is how do we perform to plan? Did we implement what we said we'll implement? Did the actions reduce it from a high risk to a moderate risk? Okay, how quickly did we identify the risks and control them? Did we leave the risks open as a high risk for 15 months when they should have been done in 6 months? Things like that. Percent of risks identified by lowest effective team, percent of mitigation plan tasks included in project team organisation schedules, ratio of cost savings attributed to risk management. Okay, percent of project or organisation targets met. So you can start to look at how effective your risk management process was. How's it working? Okay, and then the last step you can kind of look at is lessons learned. How did things work? It'll probably be more project-based that you look at these. Are the actions we put in for that project control, were they effective? Did we actually come across anything that we didn't capture at our risk assessment? Well, let's get them fed back into the system for next time. Some people will create a lessons learned log, just jot them down. You actually see it quite often in construction, funny enough, but also in aerospace. How did the project run? What went wrong? Maybe some of the suppliers weren't performing correctly. Maybe we didn't identify those risks correctly at the start. Those then get fed back in. So next time a project of a similar type is run, you can look at those lessons learned, and then you can build that into your management system going forward. As the maturity of the system develops, you can then start looking at the maturity rating for each identified risks, set some performance measures around those. Okay, we're going to come on to that in a little bit later, a bit more detail. Okay, so one of the bits that is new in the standard is clause 6.3, planning of changes. What people do is they don't think about the risk when they're making changes. When you read the clause, a lot of people believe this is to do with making a change to your procedure, documented something. Maybe we're going to up-rev something. Okay, it's actually about, think about what your changes are and how's that impacted your system. Okay, do you need to do another risk assessment? So when you make organizational changes, think of the risk. Are you actually doing a good thing? Maybe where you're going is not actually a good thing for the business. I've seen some people invest in machinery. They buy lots of new machines that look great. Well, actually, what's the risk around maybe you haven't got enough work for these? Can you afford it? What's your debt ratio? Maybe you've got too much debt in the business and maybe you shouldn't be buying these new machines. I've actually seen people invest heavily in new machines, and unfortunately it's closed their business because they didn't have the work there to support it. So just think about those risks when you are making considerable changes. Another one of the changes is organisation structure. We're creating new job roles. Maybe we're taking job roles away. Maybe we're moving people around. A job description will never paint a full picture of someone's day-to-day activities. So what are the things they do that they don't document? Okay, have you clearly identified those? So now we have John from doing one job, he's now going to go off and do another job. What about what everything John was doing? Who's going to pick those up? We often, as auditors come in, we'll see a quality manager change, and a lot of the systems will fall apart at that point. Not saying the new quality manager is bad, but some of the things that the previous quality manager was doing that aren't necessarily documented, the new guy, or girl I should say, hasn't picked up. Okay, so think about the risks of what you're doing. Don't just make decisions there and then. Moving premises, there's another risk. It was one of my clients went in one year, they'd actually expanded and gone through next door, so they'd taken over another unit. They didn't actually think about that fully, so they moved the machines over there. They were processing parts over there for 9 months. They didn't tell us, so their certificate, when you look at it, was only registered for one site, one unit address. So all of those parts that they had been putting out from their other unit basically would need to be recalled, because their requirement was that they had to be AS certified. So it had a huge impact. They didn't actually think about what they were doing fully. Yes, it sounded great, we're expanding and things like that, but they didn't contact the certification body beforehand and actually say, this is what we're doing, because we would have said, well, have you thought about this? But they should have really captured those ideas in a risk assessment process. Maybe they need to do a new risk assessment, a specific one, or just update the current one. Okay, so it should be a live document, the risk assessment process. Don't just put it out there and leave it. Keep it live, keep it fluid, keep it up to date. Think about any changes you're making to the business and how is it impacting. Changing a logo, that can also impact the business. Strangely enough, it'll impact the brand and the image. Is that a good thing? Are people then going to lose? Are you going to lose your identity slightly? Updating your logo, people won't recognize it as much. So there's actually a lot of things to consider when doing some simple processes such as changing your logo. Okay, so I'm going to touch on the risk maturity level model. This, what most management systems will do, will just have a risk assessment process in place. Just keeps going over. Okay, what you can do once you're comfortable with that is take it up to the next level and implement a risk maturity model. It helps to ensure the system is fully optimized, fully working. Okay, and it builds in another kind of scoring mechanism on your risk management process, which really drives it and makes sure it's embedded in your system. Okay, so what I'm going to do, hopefully this will work. Oops, do apologize. This should hopefully open up. So this is available on our website actually, and you can download it. So I'll just quickly run through it. It's just a template and it works the same for any organization. So you can actually use this template and build it around your business. So what you have is a scoring mechanism, 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest, and your system is fully optimized. Okay, and then what it does is it gives you a checklist against each point, and you can start scoring yourself. Okay, so if we think process, we have no risk management process established, no policies and procedures, we'll make them up as we go along. Basically you get a score of 1. Okay, so now we can start looking at what's in a level 2, and maybe we'll start implementing these, what's required. Okay, we need to start putting metrics in place. Okay, we'll get that done. Now we can then start looking at step 3. So as your system develops, time goes on, you get better at risk management, your score can go up. You can actually push yourself to look at optimizing your system. and having a really effective risk management system. So we look at behaviours around the processes. Are we communicating the risks? That's often a thing we often find, that people on the shop floor aren't actually aware of the risks surrounding their process. They know what they've got to do, but they don't really know what the risks are surrounding that. Okay. Go down to people. Do people understand the concepts? There's no training in place, and we can start to implement those training regimes, getting people more aware and promoting that awareness until we're up the top here, fully understood by all employees. You get people coming up with ideas. You know, there's a lot of employee engagement in this process. Okay, let's come down. Maybe we haven't got tools and data. Maybe we've got some, but we're not really using it. Then we can start to look at things like FMEAs, PFMEA tools, things like that. You start using some of the tools that organizations can use to help you with your risk management process. Okay, so it just takes your risk system to the next level. Okay, it's still quite new to organizations, risk management. So these type of things we see with organizations that have been doing it for a large number of years. Okay, maybe they've been really doing it for 4 years or something like that. Okay, but it's something you can start to look at. Okay, so we've got NQA, obviously we've got more support for you. We've got a dedicated aerospace team. You can email us at any time on aerospace@nqa.com if you've got any aerospace specific questions, or you can email just the general info@nqa.com where it will be picked up. Any questions at any time. We're obviously doing lots of blogs. I personally write a lot of blogs. They get put onto the NQA website, and you can also sign up for the In Touch magazine that we put out. And obviously we've got Twitter, LinkedIn, things like that. So we've got a lot of support network for you. Feel free to contact us anytime, and we've got some technical people that can help guide you through the process. And obviously the best people are your auditors. Ask them questions. Auditors aren't, they're there to audit, but they're also there to help and support you as you're on your journey. Okay, so has anyone got any specific questions? Feel free to ask them. Just type them into the questions. Okay, so we've got a question. Is the presentation available as a copy? Yes, this will be sent out after, it'll probably be next Tuesday. These will be emailed to you, and it will also be on the YouTube website. There's a question, where in the AS9100D standard is it required to document your risk management? Okay, if you look at clause 8.1, it will tell you there what you've got to do to document that. It can get a bit confusing when you look at 6.1. 6.1 is more about your process and think about the risk management process, where 8.1 is the part where it really sets out that you have to document it. Okay, and obviously there's bits in the management review meeting where you must review your actions from that. Okay. So when you're not sure if a risk with potentially negative consequence may have a positive effect. Yeah, possibly. So it may be me misunderstanding your question or the way I communicated it. So when I said about it can have a positive effect on the business. So let's just think, okay, one of our risks is we've got too much business with one customer. There's a risk there that actually that could close us as an organisation if something happens to them. Well, we can actually turn that into a positive. Maybe we start looking for more customers. Maybe we develop that relationship better with that customer to make sure they don't go anywhere else. Okay, that's what I kind of meant by that. Winston, can you explain again the risk management plan? Okay, so what I can do, let's go back through the slides. Okay, so risk management plan. The risk management plan is the whole thing together. It's not just one single bit. Okay, so to have an effective risk management plan, you set out these 4 steps. You do step 1, you make sure you identify all your risks. Then you move on to step 2, assess those risks. Then you put in actions around those risks, the high risks or the medium risks, whatever trigger point you want to use. Could be a score, doesn't have to be high, medium or low. And then you start reviewing those risks and reporting on them. Are they effective? How are we doing? Okay, so it keeps going round in a circle. We keep looking at the risks, so it all surrounds, keeps turning around the business process itself. So you would look at these through all of your processes. Okay, think about the risks through design before you start scoring it. Think about the risks of purchasing. Think about them from process development. Okay, identify those risks, then you score them, then you start taking actions against those ones you deem necessary. Okay, so there's a question, organisation changes risk. Okay, so someone would like me to go over that again. Okay, so clause 6.3 in the standard talks about planning of changes. Okay, and what it actually says, I haven't obviously put the full clauses in there, but it says what are the consequences when you're taking actions around changing. What are the consequences? So basically looking at the risks surrounding those changes. Maybe we're going to merge with someone, maybe we're going to acquire another organization. What are the risks around that? How are we going to control those risks? Okay, maybe there's key people in an organization that we're going to acquire. How do we ensure we retain those people? Okay, so it's just thinking about the risks. Most people would think about this naturally, but it could just be one person thinking about it. So it's good to get a lot more people involved in this. Okay. Depend on the skill set. Not too sure what that means there. Depend on the skill set. Yeah, not too sure what you mean there. Any other questions? No? Okay. So I'll end the webinar here, but as I said, feel free to email the team. We're aerospace@nqa.com, and we can answer any questions that you may have afterwards. Okay. Thanks for attending. Have a good day.